Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So today is January 24th. I wanted to mention a couple of things, and then we're going to talk about this this PC, Personal Conveyance stuff that's going on at Prime, and I'm going to give you my well, it's actually not a hot take. I've thought about these things for many moons. But I wanted to share a couple of things. So I want to give a shout out. Oh, let me back up, because I'm about to talk about a little bit of politics in a good way. But let me say this, okay? I am sick and tired. I am sick to death of hearing about public officials mishandling classified information, whether it's like negligence or malfeasance, whether it's Trump or Biden, or I just read that they found some classified information at Pence's house. I don't know if Obama's got any. I don't know. It's just ridiculous, right? So just real quick, okay? I had a security clearance when I was in the military, right? If I had done what these guys any of them have done, I would have at least been punished under the UCMJ, okay? But to put an even finer point on this, there was a national security advisor by the name of Samuel Sandy Berger, and I believe he was the national security advisor during the first Bush administration, or maybe at the tail end of the Reagan administration. But anyway, he was found to have classified information at his home, and I think he was prosecuted for it. Even though he had been a high government official with the highest security clearances, he was prosecuted for it. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if we need to toss somebody in jail or at least give them a felony record, but it's not okay, right? And the standard is what the standard is. Okay, so that's all I'll say about that. But it's just kind of ridiculous, and people are like, oh, the classification system's the problem. Well, you don't change a law by disobeying it or by disregarding it, right? You change the law in a proper way, and then the new standard can take hold. Okay, so politics, right? I want to talk about some bipartisan legislation that has been proposed in the House of Representatives, and the two politicians that did it are Troy Nehls, he's a Republican from Texas, and Chrissy Houlihan, who is a Democrat from Pennsylvania. And this is called the Trucker Bathroom Access Act. Okay, and just FYI, in both Texas and Pennsylvania, the job description held by more people than any other job description in those two states, as well as about 30 other states, is truck driver. That could be OTR, that could be pickup and delivery, that could be a guy driving a straight truck, but truck driver, right? And what they're proposing is to basically say to every business that does business with outside trucking companies is that they have to provide inside plumbing, inside restrooms at their facilities, and they cannot exclude people, and they must provide bathrooms for male and females to use who are their guests. And I think it's high time. I gotta believe that's one of the things that pisses off truckers more than almost anything when it comes to shippers and receivers, is being treated like, an animal, right? Like some places, there's no bathroom. I mean, there's always a bathroom for me, right? I'll always find a place to go. I'm freaking 60 years old. I'm not going to hold it, okay? But even places like, I've been to places where the porta potties clearly had not been cleaned in months. I mean, they were just like horrible places. And again, I'm a guy But I've had female trainees. There's a lot of women in trucking. It's just, it's absolutely ridiculous. So they need to be clean, inside restrooms, right? And I hope this bill passes. I hope it gets, and I'm sure there's going to be some chucklehead from one party or another that's going to be like, oh yeah, I can't vote for that, But I'm so hoping that gets passed, because I think it'll really, it's a little tiny thing, right? But it'll improve the quality of life. And, for those managers at whatever company that are like, oh yeah, we're going to use COVID as an excuse for not letting truckers use our bathrooms at all, I would like to invite you to dinner at my house. And I'm going to hold a gun to your head and make you eat a bunch. And then when you say you got to go to the bathroom, I'm gonna be like, no, you can't use my bathroom. You need to sit here in my dining room for another 2 hours. Then I'll let you leave so you can find a bathroom before you crap yourself. So anyway, that's that. So let's talk about January 24th. A lot of interesting things happened today. So on this date, January 24th, in 2023, my cousin Brandino passed the CDL test. So congratulations to Brandon. Way to go, buddy. And I got a bunch of stuff here, not necessarily in chronological order. On this date in 1972, okay, when I was 10 years old, okay, 1972, Japanese Sergeant Shoichi Yokoi was discovered on Guam. He did not know that World War II had ended, and he maintained his soldierly, combative posture until somebody was, found him. It was like, bruh, the war's been over for almost 30 years. 27 years the war had been over. Wait, is that right? 45 plus 27. Yeah. So, 27 years. So, you know what, man? I know it sounds absurd, but, he was a soldier, and, there's something to be said about that. On this date in 1536, Henry VIII, real quick, does anybody know what the official sport of the state of Maryland is? All right, we'll come back to that. Anyway, on this date in 1536, Henry VIII suffered a traumatic brain injury while jousting. And historians believe that it might have led to his later kind of impetuous, crazy behavior. He had 2 of his 6 wives executed. Yes, so the official sport, this is totally true, and I didn't have to look it up because I've known it for a while. The state sport of Maryland is jousting. They do have a Renaissance Festival in Maryland, but I couldn't tell you why it's jousting. It's not like a bunch of people are riding around on chargers and with their big jousting poles, but yeah. On this date in 1848, James W. Marshall discovered gold at Sutter's Mill in California. Sutter's Mill, so remember, this is 1848. The San Francisco football team is called the 49ers because that's when everybody really started getting out of California. But by the way, Sutter's Mill is not that close to San Francisco. It's actually on the east side of Sacramento. So it's a ways from the coast. But Sutter's Mill, gold was discovered. In 1916, the Supreme Court announced their decision in a case called Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad. And the important holding in that case was that income tax, federal income tax, is constitutional. I bring that up for a couple of reasons. One is UP had really crappy quarterly results and their stock is down big time today. But also, if you run a business, right, job one is not to cut your revenue. Now, if you're running the country, I would also think that job one would be not cut your revenue. maybe clean up the tax code, make it easier for people to file tax returns, make it easier for people to actually pay taxes. Because it turns out a lot of us don't mind paying taxes. Now, I'm on a federal pension, but I also think there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done with tax money. I think the Navy is too small. I think we're ill prepared if we have a war with anybody like China. You know, I'm not saying we need to go ape shit on defense spending, but we got a recruiting problem, we got a materiel problem, capital assets problem, and that's just one department. There are, you know, there's a lot in need. But it seems like congressional Republicans want to continue to eviscerate the IRS, and you know, what's the game, right? Like, are we just going to go with user taxes and, you know, fees that are really regressive, or are we going to start taxing corporations? And by the way, let me say this about, like, for instance, the capital gains tax. There is zero evidence that raising the capital gains tax, for example, would make people not invest, right? Rich people or people with money invest, and they're going to invest because and the tax on the gains, who cares, right? Because the gain is like found money, okay? And I could explain that. I could spend an hour explaining that. And also I could, you know, so anyway, I just think the IRS is an important agency. And honestly, from a personal perspective, I owe the IRS money. I pay the IRS all the time, but I would really like a federal agency that actually worked. Try to get a hold of somebody at the IRS. You will be on hold for hours and hours and hours. It's not a workable system. It needs to be better, not, you know, hollowed out even more. On this day in 1933, the 20th Amendment was passed. The 20th Amendment is the amendment that, I should say ratified. The amendment was ratified by the states. It's the amendment that moved the date of the inauguration back from March until January 20th. It also, there's an interesting provision in that amendment that says, if there's an election held and there's a presumptive, you know, there's a president-elect and a vice president-elect, if something happens to the president-elect, then the vice president-elect will become president. So while, you know, we've had a few vice presidents ascend to the presidency, you know, it hasn't happened all the time, certainly. And the last time it happened was during the Nixon administration, when Gerald Nixon resigned. That was 1974. Ford becomes president, right? And of course, the time before that was when Johnson became president after JFK was assassinated. But that's what, you know, but it's still important. But here's why I bring this up. It looks like the front runners for the Democratic and Republican nomination, I haven't seen any polling, but I'm just saying that it are the two guys that ran the last time. They're both freaking too old to be president, okay? And so it's really important, I think, you know, that we look at who the vice president is. I think that's an important thing. Last but not least, on this date in 1989, Ted Bundy was executed by the state of Florida. Let's see. So I want to talk real quick. I had some other stuff to talk about, but enough of that. I want to talk real quick about this personal conveyance thing. So, you know, I've read a lot of laws over the years. I've read a lot of federal regulations. I spent a year in law school working at a federal agency. I've looked at all sorts of stuff. And I definitely have read the FMCSA, what they say about personal conveyance and how personal conveyance can be used. And so, you know, there's a lot of misinformation about personal conveyance. In fact, you know, and I've mentioned that Prime puts out misinformation. But But apparently, you know, there's some impetus for, you know, cracking down on PC and essentially trying to eliminate it, because when drivers can't use personal conveyance without permission and without some electronic thing getting opened up on their Qualcomm, it's, you know, that is a constructive withdrawal of that privilege, right? Because here's an example. I had a live loaded call to do last night. I was on hold for 16 minutes. Then guess what happened? Yeah, I got voicemail. So you can, and so, you know, you'd think that that's more important than somebody asking for personal conveyance to go from a receiver to a truck stop or to go, you know, do something. But, you know, it feels different, right? And, you know, I said to somebody yesterday, I said, you know, isn't it odd that that all this hullabaloo, all this brain damage about personal conveyance, and by the way, well, let me finish that thought first. That all this is happening after there's a market downturn. Like, I'm guessing that Prime has had people violating the rules on personal conveyance, has had people get caught and ticketed, ergo more CSA points for them and for Prime, and that Prime has had issues show up periodically when they've been audited in-house, all on the personal conveyance stuff for a long time, right? For a long time. But why? So why now? Why not a year and a half ago? And I think the answer is, at least the conclusion I draw, and this is based in nothing other than just kind of some life experience and, you know, seeing how companies operate, advising companies, even advising companies on how to get rid of people, candidly. You know, people, you know, employers I used to handle appeals of unemployment and stuff. Like, my client would say, oh, you know, this person was discharged for cause, and then they'd say, no, I wasn't, I should be able to collect unemployment, and then we'd have to go to an administrative law hearing with an ALJ, an administrative law judge. But why now? Well, I think the reason is because they can, right? The market's softer, although by the way, I'm having a great week. My week this week will be the best of the year, and probably the best in the past couple of months. But anyway, you know, I think the market's soft. I don't know that Prime doesn't want to kind of, you know, do what I call stealth firings or stealth layoffs. The term stealth layoff kind of comes from the legal industry, where somebody will be an associate at a firm, and no firm wants to like fire associates, because first of all, everybody there is a lawyer, right? You don't want to say somebody did something wrong, right? Now, they're at-will employees. You can let them go at any time, but firms don't want that reputation, right? They want to attract the stars. But let's say you got somebody that's not a star. They're not going to make partner. Maybe they've been there 4 or 5 years. You call them in, you say, hey, you know, we really appreciate your work here and stuff, but, you know, over the next couple of months, you might want to consider looking for a job. And that's shorthand for, we don't want to fire you, we don't want to lay you off, but we do want you to leave on your own terms and in the near term. You know, in the next 3 to 6 months, we want you gone. That's a stealth layoff. So, you know, one way to piss off people in the trucking industry is by tampering with personal conveyance, right? 99, you know, I don't know what percentage of us use personal conveyance correctly. Now, I have admitted that I've used personal conveyance incorrectly. I know the rules, and I know when I'm doing it wrong. And you know, the times that I have done it wrong is simply because I took a load that, for what, you know, oftentimes for reasons out of my control, I wasn't going to be able to get it delivered on time. So I just made shit happen, right? And my fleet manager kind of sort of knew these things, or night dispatch kind of sort of knew these things. And they never really, they didn't go, well, hold on, I don't think you have enough hours to get there. They don't ask questions, right? They, like Nelson, they turn a blind eye to it. So it's not just drivers that are part of the problem. It's also operations. But so anyway, somebody got to be in their bonnet about this personal conveyance, and maybe they're just like, hey, we're just gonna, threaten people. We're gonna make it arduous to use it. Instead of and basically this is group punishment, right? It's group punishment. It's making more work for the drivers. It's also making more work for support people. But here's another thing that I want to focus on. And by the way, there is, personal conveyance is actually fairly open, right? Like the FMCSA says you can be loaded and go and use PC, right? You can use PC anytime you're not doing something that is directed or on behalf of your company, right? It doesn't matter. You can even move from a shipper to a receiver in the same direction that you would have to go for your next load, as long as it's kind of coincidental, right? And, you're not doing anything wrong. And Prime has this 1 hour window bullshit. Well, here's the other piece of this, right? I'm an independent contractor. When you start telling me how I have to use my hours of service, you're, in my opinion, crossing a line that gets into direct management of me. You're not asking me to do something and letting me figure out how to get it done. You're directing how I do something. Okay, and let me give you an example. I have on more than one occasion dropped a load in a place that's sort of close to my home because I wanted to go on home time. The last time I was home over the weekend, and I took a load to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is more than an hour from my home, but once I was unloaded, got the trailer buttoned up, and I had gotten permission to bring the trailer home with me because I was only going to be home for about like 48 hours or something, maybe 60 hours, So I PC'd home, right? Did I have time on my clock? Yeah, sure. But that's also not a requirement. You could have 10 hours and 59 minutes left on your drive clock, and you can PC if you are not doing something for your company, right? And I wasn't. I was going home. It just so happened that how I was getting home was this truck that I pay the payments on, that I pay the insurance on, and that I pay the fuel for the fuel, right? So the notion that somebody can say to me, hey, there's this legal thing that truck drivers can do per the federal government, but we're going to tell you you can't. And by the way, if I have to ask permission, that's already crossed the line, even if they always grant the permission. Okay? So, Prime's been sued more than once, I think, for crossing the line and doing things that basically are indicia of somebody not being an independent contractor, but being an employee. And I think this is crossing that line. But let me say this further. It's amazing to me that they're so focused on PC when there are all these other categories of hours of service, right? Driving, yard move, on duty, off duty, sleeper berth. There's 5 other things. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and I'm gonna put myself on report. Right this second, my clock says sleeper berth. I am violating the regulations on sleeper berth, right? Are they going to take sleeper berth away from me? Of course not. Why? because that would be, you know, one of the dumbest things ever. But let me take it a step further and illustrate this point. Let's say that I am in Springfield, right? I pulled in there, I had an empty trailer, I go through inbound, and I drop the trailer, and then they take the trailer off me. They unattach it from me. So I don't have a trailer, I'm just sitting there bobtail. But even if I had a trailer, this scenario, the facts wouldn't change and the outcome wouldn't change. But let's say I'm sitting there and I'm one of those people that they've decided has to call to get permission to use PC. So I call and I'm like, hey, I need permission to go to PC to Walmart. And they say, oh, well, you got 10 hours of drive time left. You don't need to PC to Walmart. And they say, just go out there on the drive line. If they say that and I do that, I have misused driving. I have misused the drive line. Yeah, that's right. It's possible to misuse any category of the hours of service. Yet, the only one we seem to be talking about is PC. You know, when you pull into a truck stop and you're at the pump and you put yourself off duty maybe, or maybe you put yourself on duty, but then you pull forward, but you do it slow enough so it doesn't put you on the drive line? That's not legal, right? It's a technological glitch, but when you're moving this truck and you're not, there's only 3 ways you can move the truck legally. 3 hours is standard, right? Driving, personal conveyance, or yard move, right? On duty, off duty, sleeper berth, do not contemplate the truck moving, okay? But we all do it. We all do it. Every single truck driver, except the ones that are too dumb to realize that you can do that with ELD, right? Everybody does it. Here's another way that stuff gets used illegally. Yard move, right? Well, with ELD, right, yard move does not trigger a transfer to the drive line unless you hit or exceed 20 miles an hour. So here's the scenario. Let's say that I'm at a truck stop, but let's say that I was at a receiver and I'm like, okay, it's time to leave. You know, they said I can leave. So let's say that I either put myself in yard move or I just happen to leave it in yard move, right? Start the truck up, I pull out. When I get to the road, when I get to any publicly used thoroughfare, right? Any non-private road, so a road that's open to the public, once I turn my wheels onto that road, it's illegal to be in PC. But guess what? Everybody does it, right? I was at a receiver yesterday. Max speed was 15 miles an hour. Some it's 5, some it's 10, whatever, right? Guess when I went on the drive line? It wasn't on their property. It was after I pulled into the street, right? And accelerated to 20 miles an hour. Then it put me on the drive line. That's illegal, okay? But no one says anything about that. Why? Because it would be dumb. Have you ever tried to actually put yourself manually on the drive line? It's kind of a pain in the butt. I would say almost 100% of all times that trucks are put on drive lines with ELD, it's the automatic feature. They either were in off-duty, on-duty, sleeper berth. They were in some other status other than PC, because PC, it won't shift you, right? They were in some other status, and then they were automatically put on it, right? But if you drive off private property in yard move, that's a violation. Why are we not talking about that? Why? Because no freaking DOT inspector in their right mind is going to say anything about that. It would be really hard to prove. So let's go back to the scofflaws who are routinely messing up with, personal conveyance. all this starts at the top, right? There are fleet managers who know that they have people that are abusing personal conveyance on the regular. And every once in a while, these same people get pulled in and they get caught, okay? And so what I think is, I think we ought to do it this way. When I was a company commander at Recruit Training Command, right? If a recruit did something wrong, you know, they got some kind of punishment, demerit, whatever. But if a lot of recruits did something wrong, that meant they weren't, the Navy's view on it, the command's view was, these guys are not properly trained. And that is not a hit on the recruits. It's a hit on the company commanders. It's called a training deficiency. You'd never want a touchdown, right? Because that means you're not doing your job right. So what I would do is, if I was over this stuff, the first place I'd start to go is to fleet managers. And I'd say, hey, we had 1,034 incidents of people getting caught either on audits or on roadside inspections for personal conveyance misuse. But 19% of them were your fleet. That's a leadership problem, right? You're the fleet manager. Somewhere along the line, right, there's this mindset that it's okay. And it wouldn't surprise me that some fleet managers have significantly worse numbers than others, okay? It also wouldn't surprise me to learn that the test platforms for this stuff are the ones that they've already identified. So if we're going to penalize drivers, then let's penalize everybody in the chain of command. Let's penalize the reefer division manager, right? You know, because we all know we've had loads put on us where we're like, hey, I can't get this delivered on time, right? And I shouldn't say put on us, because we can reject a load. But they don't like you rejecting a load if you're like, you know, if you're close. But, you know, like my truck, for instance, won't even do 65, right? I mean, it'll do, you know, whatever downhill. But if I'm on a flat, the fastest my truck goes is 64, even when the cruise says 65. Okay? So I have to really consider how long it's going to take me to get somewhere. But you know, I really think that, you know, this personal conveyance stuff, you know, what they ought to do is just work a little harder, right? Identify the problem children, right? Quit trifling with everybody. Identify the problem children. Because as I've just shown, and I could prove it, right? I could prove it in court, actually. Everybody violates pretty much every category of the hours of service. Everybody. You know, like one time I had a guy in an orientation said, if you're in sleeper berth, if you're on your 10-hour break and you're in sleeper berth and you decide to go to the bathroom, and you go inside to go to the bathroom, you're supposed to take yourself out of sleeper berth and put yourself in off duty. And I'm like, well, why is going to the bathroom off duty? It's a driver need. You know, why is fueling on duty, you know, but other stuff isn't? Like if I sweep out my truck, right? If I grab my carpet out of here and shake it out, that's doing stuff to improve my work environment. Isn't that work? Right? I'm not shaking out the carpet because somebody's going to pay me, right? I'm shaking it out because I want my truck clean. Well, they say, oh, well, if you wash your truck, right, that's on duty. Well, what about vacuuming it? And my point about all this is that all the regulations are pretty ambiguous. And trucking companies have allowed DOTs and cops to interpret these things and just make shit up as they go. And then the companies themselves have done the same thing. Okay? So if they want to take away personal conveyance from somebody, are they also going to take away yard move, sleeper berth? I mean, what are they going to take away next? Because, I told somebody, I said, hey, this is my truck, okay? This is my truck. If I want to drive, and I've taken this truck to national parks, presidential, sites, battlefields, I drive somewhere. If I don't have a trailer, I'll drive somewhere. I just go wherever I want. Why? Because I'm paying the bills, right? I got a lease. If you were leasing a car, you wouldn't, if you were leasing a car, you wouldn't be like, oh, my leasing company says I'm not allowed to go in that neighborhood. You wouldn't put up with that. So why should I? I'm not using PC wrongfully, and it's my truck. If they want to buy all the fuel and everything, pay for everything, fine. We can have a different conversation. They can pay all the taxes that they haven't paid since I've been a contractor. I don't care. But if they want to have an independent contractor model, then they just got to let certain things go, right? They got to relinquish some control. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm more than happy to hear it, but please do not put comments, right, that are not based in fact. I don't deal in rumor, innuendo, or any of that, what we used to call in the Navy sea lawyering. Read the regulations. There's a Q&A on the FMCSA's website, right? It's very specific. You can be loaded, right? You can be, you can move towards your ultimate destination on PC if you're doing something, that's personal. And, and too many people have, don't understand the rules. Both, they're either too stringent or too lax. But so if you comment, I'd be happy to hear it. I'm personally going to take a stand on this because I think it's, like I said, I don't know what they're up to. I don't know what the design here is, but it just kind of smacks of overreach, at least as to lease operators. It's a different kettle of fish when you're a company guy. But anyway, I will talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in.